Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Former Unified Champion Anthony Joshua has given a strong indication that his rematch with Andy Ruiz Jr. is going to be on neutral ground. In an interview on Sky Sports with Adam Smith, Anthony Joshua spoke about neutral ground a number of times in regards to the rematch. He said, and I quote, "Wherever it is, it will be on neutral grounds. I want Ruiz to have a say. He's a champ. I want to fight here. He wants to fight elsewhere. We'll fight on neutral grounds. No problem." He said neutral grounds in other parts of the interview, but also within the interview, he spoke of his desire to fight in Cardiff, to be back in the UK, to have the advantage of being at home, and the energy that comes with 70 to 80,000 fans, and his desire and really his will to want to fight in front of his fans. So it was a little bit contradictory to sort of talk about that, but then he went on to say neutral ground quite a number of times. But that quote, which I just went through, that is a clear indication that it could in fact actually go out of the UK. And neutral ground, I guess that means that the US would also be out. And presumably that would also rule out Nigeria and Mexico. But I'll come back to that in a second. I just want to get to a couple of other things that he said. He talked about he's being focused on getting his belts back, training, and in terms of sticking with the same setup. He said, look, I'm not dumping Robert McCracken. There's three options. He said, stick with McCracken, add something to the team he's already got, or throw everything out. And he said, look, we're not throwing everything out. We're doing a bit of 1 and 2. So they are going to get some more help for Anthony Joshua. And actually, there was a curious comment near the start of the interview, which you may well be able to find on the Sky Sports website at some point. And he sort of said about getting his passion back. And I don't know if that was a sort of slip of the tongue in terms of not really meaning to say that, but it did indicate, at least when he said it, I thought, did that mean he lost his passion ahead of the fight with Ruiz? It was just a bit of a curious point in the interview. But in terms of does Andy Ruiz Jr. have a say on where the rematch is, Joshua said, I've seen him do a lot of talking about what he wants, but he don't call the shots in that sense. And when he was asked, well, when are we going to get a decision on the rematch, when it's being announced, he said, I've taken a step back from the business. The decisions is due when the decisions is due, and that he needed to focus on his training and that he is going to be looking to add things in. And he needs to, when someone's fighting back like Andy Ruiz Jr., he needs to be able to slip punches instead of just taking them on his chin or the side of his head or whatever. So Anthony Joshua clearly signaling he wants to be a bit slicker on the defensive end for his rematch with Andy Ruiz Jr., which remains to be seen when it will be. But this was a bit of a marker in the sand, I think, just to indicate, because they had to say something. They did, because it's been sort of just dragging on for a bit now. It was actually a week or two ago, you might remember, they sort of said in the next couple of days, the next week, things that Eddie Hearn was saying, it was like it was almost imminent. So this is a bit of a stopgap measure, I think, just to actually, one, sort of indicate that the UK may be dipping out here, and from what Joshua was saying, that it's likely to go to neutral grounds, but they needed to get something out there publicly just to reassure fans and the public more broadly that something is going to be happening and that they're closing in on something and it's likely to be on neutral ground. And I guess that brings me back to the question, well, what does that actually mean? Where could it be? And what is considered neutral ground? Because I have seen a number of people sort of say neutral ground would include Nigeria, but with Anthony Joshua being of Nigerian descent, is that really neutral ground? I guess it comes down to people's personal definitions about what neutral ground is, because obviously he's a UK citizen, he fights in the United Kingdom, he hasn't fought in Nigeria, so does that mean that Nigeria is neutral ground? I would have sort of thought for both Andy Ruiz Jr. and Anthony Joshua that the country that they're from, but also the country they're descended from, would not be neutral ground. So I would say for Ruiz Jr., Mexico, and also where he's from, which is the United States, is not neutral ground. And for Joshua, Nigeria and the UK is not neutral ground. So if we were to just look at it like that, and I guess some people will have different views on whether Nigeria or Mexico is neutral ground, but put that aside for a second, what else is there? I mean, are we talking about Japan? Is that a potential option? Has some rich investor put up a whole bunch of money? Are we talking about China? Could they do the bird's nest? Could we be talking about Saudi Arabia? We've just seen the Super Boxing League have Amir Khan front a card just a few weeks back in July 2019. Is that something that we could be looking at with some rich investors there coming to the party going, look, we want to have this rematch. This is what we're prepared to offer. Because I think some of what the delay could be here is it's not that they couldn't sort out Cardiff, not that they couldn't sort out that rematch to be in the UK, because they clearly could have. But ultimately, boxing is about money. It is a business disguised as a sport. Let's not kid ourselves. It's all about the money. It always has been. And if the event, the rematch, lands on neutral ground, it's going to be because that place, wherever it is, has put up the most money for the fight. They've said, look, we're prepared to offer you X, Y, and Z, and if it's greater than anywhere else, it's likely to be chosen. And there could have been a bit of a bidding war in terms of, some negotiations going on with a few different parties with, in contention for the fight and going back and forth, playing them off against each other. It wouldn't surprise me in the least. And if you have some big money investors willing to go, okay, this is going to be a massive event for our country, for our city that it's going to be in, it could really, this is going to be the biggest fight for the remainder of 2019. No other fight, I don't think, can get bigger than this for the rest of the year. I think Canelo's next fight, it might be close, but I think the Joshua and Ruiz rematch for the rest of the year, it is going to be the biggest, just in my view. Saudi Arabia, Japan, China. Is there somewhere else? Another Asian or African country that might come out of the blue, might not be a place that had been associated with boxing previously? Or are we thinking maybe somewhere, obviously there was that Thriller in Manila, the Rumble in the Jungle. Some of those countries, could they do their own sort of thing 40 or 50 years later and have an iconic event which will be remembered forever and a day? Because the Thriller in Manila and the Rumble in the Jungle, I think most people within not just the boxing sort of fandom, but more generally, have heard of those things. It's not something just restricted to boxing fans only. And maybe they will look to try carve out a little piece of legacy. And if it is on neutral ground, maybe that does favour Anthony Joshua. He is used to the big occasion. He's used to those big open venues with massive crowds. Andy Ruiz Jr., not so much. So maybe even if it is on neutral ground and, in a setting that Joshua is familiar with, that could end up being, something that's an advantage to him over Ruiz. Every little advantage you can get, these guys will want to try crib, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about money too, and it always has been. But what do you make of this? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.